Is Miss Sheila kind of a human spell checker for you most times?
Lexi, we're recording our class now, so I'm going to start going to class. We're half an hour into it, so I want to start recording. We are in lesson 2 of the Prayerbook Hebrew class, and I wanted to share vocabulary. So you'll notice that the vocabulary for this one, we have words like M, which means mother. M is mother. You may also know the word Ima. Ima means mom, but this is not that. This is mother. We're talking Prayerbook Hebrew. We don't usually talk about mommies in Prayerbook Hebrew. And then bracha. Bracha is a blessing. Bracha. Not to be confused with a brucha, which is the way I grew up, brucha. You say a brucha, right? Marla, how did you say it? Brucha? Yep. So you say a bracha or a brucha, which is a blessing, which is a bracha from the root bet resh chaf. Eretz is land. Eretz, land. I told you that anything that has two es together, is the accent's going to be on the first syllable. Eretz. Bracha the accent was at the last syllable. If it's a multisyllabic word, the majority of time the word is going to be on the accent's going to be on the end of the word. Then we have vocabulary. We have at, and you point to a female and you say at. And then we have ha, and this did not work out very well. You're supposed to have ha with, it gets affixed to the beginning of a word. And there's going to be a dagesh, a dot in that letter, whatever the beginning of that word is, unless it is a letter that cannot take a dagesh, and then there's compensation for it. But there's supposed to be a dot, and the dot is kind of hiding behind it there. But ha, with the dagesh, it's a white X because you don't know what the letter is. And then you have the word he, which to an English speaker means she or it. But an Israeli doesn't see its. All they see are she's. That if it's a machberet, where's my machberet? If it's a machberet, then they think of it as a she. And it doesn't stress them to think of it as a she because it's not a gender she, it's a grammatical she. It's just a feminine gender. So it's a feminine grammatical perspective. So remember we did the she, he, who, me thing where we say, she in English is he in Hebrew. So this is the he. She in English is he in Hebrew. That's one of the more frustrating parts of this. And then we get to zot, which we learned in the other class. Ma zot. Zot. What is this? Zot is this for a feminine thing. And then we get me. Who, me? So who is me? Me means who. This word you should know, Shabbat, accents on the second syllable, Shabbat, Shabbat. And then this one, again, it depends on whether you're doing an Ashkenazic or a Sephardic pronunciation. So the word in modern Israel is Sarah. In Ashkenazic pronunciation or Ashkephardic pronunciation, you would say Sarah. Because the Ashkenazic pronunciation tends to have the syllable toward the front of the word. Sarah, I'm going to say Sarah. Sarah, it's not sa, it's Sarah. There's no a in Hebrew. Sarah. So those are all of our vocabulary words. Let's take a look again. We have and this mother. Bracha. Eretz is land. At is you, if I'm talking to a female. Ha is affixed to the beginning of a word. It's a prefix, which means it's squished directly to. It looks like it's not independent from. It looks like it's part of the word, but it is not part of the word. We added it, and it means the. It's what's also known as the definite article, or defart for short, because kids like to say that. So the definite article is the. There is no a in Hebrew. Ha is the. And the is normally not just prefixed to the beginning of a word. You can't have a the in Hebrew that's separated from a word, and it will have a dagesh, the dot in the letter, unless it's a letter that can't take a dagesh, and then there's compensation. Lexi? You want me to undo? You want me to unmute you? Okay, good.
Word that were discussed in it's part of another word. Would that be like replay or redo? The words replay or redo in English?
Yeah, I would hesitate about making English connections, but re is kind of a prefix for replay and redo. So if you're talking about it for that perspective, yes. So if you want, you can have that that it is. And you can't have re all by itself, just like you're not going to have ha all by itself. But if you're now going to make everybody think that ha is like re, they're not going to remember that it's the, they're going to remember that it's re, and that could be a problem. But ha is the, it's got the short vowel ha, and it's got a digation. A digation is hiding. Don't ask me why, but it's supposed to be there. He is she, which is frustrating. She is he is she. No, she in English is he, in Hebrew, she is he. Zot is this for a feminine. We had ze is this masculine. Me is the question. It's interrogative. Me is who. It's not, I'm not going to say, it is the question, me. It's not like the one who was writing the story. That's a different word. This is who is it? Mi zot, who is this? Shabbat is the word Shabbat. And you'll notice that the reason why the word Shabbat is spelled with two B's in Shabbat, even though in English, if I spelled it with one B, it would sound almost the same, or potentially the same. It's spelled with two B's because there's a digation. Well, because I'll have to explain it, but it has to do with the digation, that bet. And then Sarah. We didn't talk about syllables, so I'm not going to mess with the syllables yet. If you want, you can make flashcards by printing English and Hebrew sides. You can have the ones that are solid or the ones that you fill in the blank. There's flashcards that you could do online in order or randomized. So let's see. And this is what I thought I was going to do for that other class as well. So if you want to know how to say the word blessing, it's here. And if you want to make the sound, you click on it. Oh, the audio file no longer exists. What? Of course it exists. I just have to find it. I don't know where it went. We'll have to find it. That's not good. So this is bracha, and it's random. Click anywhere on here. Eretz, and I wrote in little teeny letters. No longer exists. Where did we hide it? Land, zot. All right, we're gonna have to fix those. Nobody told me that they weren't fixed. Rats. Okay, let's come back out of this. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. So let me go back to the page again. So I'm going to lag a little bit. Any questions about those words? I will tell you that low system resources. I will tell you that last week, this is what we're going to learn today, that last week, all of the words we learned were masculine singular words. And this week, all of the words we're learning are feminine singular words. And we're going to learn things to do with those. So all of this is from the Hebrew doc website. We're in lesson 2. And the next thing I'm going to do is share the screen and show you the secret. The secret is if I click on this, we'll get to the chapter. And I shouldn't have showed it to you. All right, so at the beginning of every chapter, there's going to be an oral review. An oral review is one of my favorite ways of reviewing things. And so this is what you know so far. You should be able to understand these sentences. So you should be able to hypothetically read them, and you should be able to hypothetically understand them. So number 1 says, Ani av. That's a sentence. That means, right, I am a father. Ata melech. Ata melech means you, masculine singular. Remember, all the words in the oral review right now are only masculine and singular. Ata melech means you are a king or a ruler, or a sovereign, or however you want to translate that. Hu Moshe. Hu Moshe means he is Moses or Moshe. Yisrael Am. That means Israel is a nation, or Yisrael Am means Israel is a people. Ze echad, this is one. Ze echad. This is one. Moshe av. So in the first sentence, we saw ani av, I'm a father. This is Moshe av, Moses is a father. And now in number 7, it says Moshe melech. Moses is a king or a ruler. Number 8, hu melech. He is a king. And then number 9 is ze'am. This is a nation or a people. Then we learned our vocabulary because I showed it to you before. And they're showing you in their book the prefix ha by showing you ha with a hyphen, but you're never going to see the hyphen in the Hebrew in the prayer book or anything. It's not going to, that's not what the hyphen is going to mean. You're not going to see ha prefixed. And at least I show you that there's a dot in it afterwards also. And then we do, let's see, which one is page 7? I think we go this way, shoop. Okay. I think. Nope, that's 9. All right. It's hard doing this in Hebrew and English way. So the English word the is not a separate word in Hebrew, as Lexi was pointing out. Instead, the letter hey is attached to the beginning of the Hebrew noun, and usually you'll see the ah vowel under it, and usually you see a dot, which is called a dagesh, afterwards. So it's going to be something like this, ha with a dagesh. And these are examples. If I say melech, it means king or a king. And if I say ha-melech, it means the king or the king. If I say Shabbat, it means Sabbath. If I say ha-Shabbat, it means the Sabbath. There's not a right place, by the way, to put the dagesh in some consonants. You're not going to be wrong if you put the dagesh in the other space. Each word processor may do it slightly differently. Bracha means blessing. Ha-bracha means the blessing. Can I tell the difference between whether there's a dagesh in ha-bracha or not? Can't tell. It's a double duty dot. I would need the dagesh for bracha, but I also need the dagesh for ha-bracha, for making a ha at the beginning, for the blessing. Oh, and now I'm supposed to go this way. So, and I'm in trouble here because I may have to see if I can log in with another device because it's not letting me draw. There are certain consonants that are not allowed to take dagesh. They are the essentially silent consonants. And the essentially silent consonants are gutturals and resh. And I remember them by saying ha'ach ra, those 5 consonants, ha'ach ra. I may be able to write ha'ach ra. Let me see if I could write ha'ach ra. Can I say ha'ach ra? Nope, it's not even letting me do that. Let me do Hebrew and let me do text and let me write text here and say ha'ach ra. It's not letting me write at all. So the five consonants that cannot take a dagesh are what I call ha'ach ra, which means the brother is bad. It doesn't mean your brother is bad, but those are the 5 letters. I can do it in order: aleph, hey, chet, ayin, and resh. Aleph, hey, chet, and ayin are the gutturals. They're the letters that are essentially kind of silent. At most, they make a sound. Resh is in that same family. It's a little bit more solid than the gutturals, but those 5 consonants cannot take a dagesh. They're kind of, sort of, or essentially silent. And there's a different compensation depending on what kind of letter it is and what happens. So if it's before, I'm going to tell you the rules. You're not going to have to worry about them. And I can't believe I can't show it to you. It's not letting me draw or anything on my share right now. So if it's an aleph or an ayin or a resh, it's going to be kamatz under the ha. Like where it shows you here for ha'av, that's before an aleph, it's turning into this. If it's a hey with a kamatz or a chet with a kamatz at the beginning of the word, then it's going to turn into an eh. So I'm going to say hechaver. I mean, so you'll see it, and I'll show them to you as they come. That's the best way for me to explain it. So the vowels for some words change. So for ha'am, it's going to be kamatz underneath it, which is this ha'am. If it's an aleph, it's going to be kamatz. And here's the thing. As of right now, because you're still like in 1st or 2nd grade, you do not have to remember when it's going to be one of these and when it's going to be one of these and when it's going to have a dagesh and when it's not going to have a dagesh. You're not going to have to remember when to do it. This is prayer book Hebrew. All you have to do is, if you saw the word haaretz and it has this funky ha before it, you just have to know that means the land. That's what it means. You don't have to remember that you needed to put this kind of a instead of the other kind of an You don't have to remember that yet. One day, hopefully you'll get it better, but don't worry about it right now. You know that sometimes letters have dots inside of them. Don't worry about it. They're not, it says they're complicated. They're not complicated. They're really, really easy. But until you learn a few more words where you can really feel the difference between why you're doing it or not, it's going to involve understanding syllables, for example. And until you know a few more words, it's not worth worrying about it, okay? I don't want you to think of it as complicated though. That makes me sad, because once I learned those rules, everything got easier for me. But what's happening now is you've got masculine nouns and feminine nouns, like you've got av is masculine, m is feminine. That's obvious because of the meaning, but let's see if we could learn other things. There are two kinds of words for you, for the you in the singular form. Ata is what you use for addressing a male, and at is what you use for addressing a female. I want to point out some really funky things in these words. Ata is arguably, possibly the most common word in all of Hebrew. Ata. You have to say ata a lot. 98% of the time, maybe 97, but 98% of the time, if a word ends in with this vowel, this vowel and the hey at the end, if it ends in it's feminine. Just like in all the other languages, you know, that have masculine and feminine things. Like if I say chica, it means a female. If I say chico, it means a male. If it ends in sound, it's going to be feminine, except for what is arguably the most common word in all of Hebrew, and that's ata. And ata is the masculine form. And then at, which has all of these funky things happening at the end. Normally, if I said at, I would not need a dagesh at the end. And I would not need a shva at the end of a word. I do not need either of those things. And I would not need a combination of those two things. I don't need either of them, and I don't need both of them. And it is not nearly as common as ata, but it is a fairly common word, and it's got all of the above in it. So what you have to do is just remember, point to a guy, say ata, point to a gal, say at, and just remember those are the words. Ata, av, you are a father. At, em, you are a mother. You have to remember those. Normally, a word that ends in is feminine, or a word that ends in tav is feminine. Just like in French, you know, where you say Juliette to pick on Lexi's middle name. It's a feminine name. And so just like in that, if you end a word with a tav, or you end a word with an those are usually the ways of saying that it's masculine or feminine. It's not exactly happening here in the vocabulary that they're giving us so far, because the word em, which means mother, does not fit that bill. It's not and it's not tav, but it's a mother, so it's feminine. There are a couple of others that are going to be like that. And I don't know why they started with those words, except for the fact that they're very common words. And so you need to know them. So if I say Zeh HaMelech, oh wait, we're also doing, these words are masculine and feminine. Zeh is this, masculine, and Zot is this, feminine, but you knew that from our other class. So if I say Zeh HaMelech, it means this is the king, and I'm using Zeh because Melech is masculine. If I say Zeh Ha'am, it means this is the people, and I'm using Zeh because Am is masculine. If I say Zot Ha'em, then I'm using Zot because Em, mother, is feminine. And if I say Zot Ha'aretz, then I'm going to use Zot because the word for land is a feminine noun. And I want to share something with you. I'm going up to the tippy top here. I want you to see that the word eretz is We talked about it specifically, that when you have the two es together, the accent's on the first and I mentioned it, the word for land is eretz. Eretz. So how come all of a sudden, if I want to say the land, I don't say ha-eretz? Because you don't. It's one of the few words that always changes the vowels whenever you're adding a ha to it. And it's a really common word, but I'm going to say haaretz. Every time I add a ha to land, to eretz, it's going to be haaretz. Haaretz is such an important word. It's in the first sentence of the Torah, and it starts the second sentence of the Torah. It is when it's the name of a newspaper in Israel, haaretz, which means the land. And when I talk about the land, haaretz, I'm talking about Israel. And when I'm talking about haaretz, I'm talking about the promised land. But I'm not going to say haaretz. I'm never going to say haaretz. I'm going to say eretz, but I'm never going to say haaretz. It's always going to be haaretz. And that's just something that you need to know. So that's like having to know 3 different vocabulary words right there. I can say ani and use it whether I am a male or I am a female. I can say ani Moshe, or I can say ani Sarah, and I stays the same, whatever. Me is a question, and me does not have to change for gender or the rest of the sentence. Mi ata is who are you? Mi ha'em, who is the mother? And that's how that word is used. So far, so good? Ish. All right, and then we get to exercises. So we can see if we understand these. Although we haven't had a lot of time to digest these vocabulary words, but who of. So in the last class, we were doing point to yourself with your thumb and say ani. And point to, here, I'm going to take this guy. It's Purim. This is my decorated minion guy, my Purim dressed up in a costume. So if you point to my minion and you say ata, you. And if you point to any of us on the screen, you say at, you. If I want to talk about him, then I would use my thumb and I'd refer to him, and I'm not going to look at him. I'm going to say who, because who is he? That means he. And if I am talking about female, I'm not going to look at her, and I'm going to say he, she. So she is he, and he is who, and who is me, just in case you're confused. And by the way, I do have the who's on first thing in Hebrew on my website. So if you need to see that at some point, I got that one. And it's not about the baseball team with a who and he and whatever. It's the Hebrew version. All right. So hu av means he is a father. Hu ha'av, number 2, means he is the father. Do you see the difference? This is really helpful to see this distinction. Hu av, he is a father. Hu ha'av means he is the father. I hope you're trying to say these. He em means she is a mother. He em, she is a mother. He ha'em means she is the mother. Ze'am, this is a nation, this is a people. Ze'ha'am means this is the nation or this is the people. Zot bracha, this is a blessing. Or zot habracha. I think you're getting the point here. And translating more into English, I want to remind you that translating from Hebrew to English is way more important in prayer book Hebrew than it is to be able to come up with your own words yourself. We're trying to understand the prayer book. And I don't know if you noticed, but I have on this page, Motzi. I have a Motzi video here for you because that's part of what we're teaching is Motzi here. So let's take a look at the Motzi blessing. So we call it the Motzi or Hamotzi because if I ask you what's the blessing for bread, and if you started with Baruch Atah and you kept saying the whole blessing for me to show off that you know the blessing, you better have bread in your hand to eat. Because if you thank God for this bread, then you better have bread to eat it. Otherwise, in some sense, you're taking God's name in vain. So if I say, what's the blessing for bread? Then a good way to answer is either Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, which is the part that's unique after these first 6 words, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, praised or blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe. That is common to most blessings. So minimally, Baruch Atah Adonai is in every bracha, praised are you, Adonai. Most blessings then say, Eloheinu melech haolam, our God, ruler of the universe. And you'll notice that I'm taking a pause in between. I am not saying this as a blessing. I'm saying a pause in between. Then you can either call this hamotzi lechem min haaretz, or the only blessing that says who's bringing forth something from something is hamotzi. And so if I just say hamotzi, then I know what you're talking about. And it's actually hamotzi lechem min haaretz, but we're doing ashkafardik here. And we're going to say hamotzi because that is where the accent falls there. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. We're all going to sing it that way. You say it before bread. After ha, there's a dagesh in the mem. And they're going to point out that there's 3 ha's here. This one is ha with the dagesh. This is ha before a guttural, a silent consonant. So we compensate by putting an a there. And this is ha before a guttural. And we're going to compensate by putting this kind of a vowel there. Again, you do not need to remember which one is which. You just need to remember that this ha means the, and this ha means the, and this ha means the, even if the vowel changes. And then we have the blessing for wine. So if I wanted to say, what's the name of the blessing for wine? I could either say Borei Pri Hagafen, but the problem is we have lots of blessings that start with Borei Pri. So I'm not going to say it's the Borei blessing because there are a bunch of blessings. Because if I want to say the fruit of the earth, Borei Pri Ha'adama, or if I want to say the fruit of the tree, Borei Pri Ha'etz, or if I want to say, there's a few that are Boreis. So I might say, what's the blessing for wine? And you might say Hagafen. And if you wanted to say the fruit of the ground, you might say ha'adama. And if you wanted to say the fruit of the tree, you might say ha'etz. I want to point out something very cool. And this is something that the Sephardim and the Middle Eastern Jews sometimes do differently than the Ashkenazic Jews. Remember that I said, and the word is here, sorry, ha'aretz, that I'm always going to say, I'm going to try to show it to you here. I'm always going to say haaretz. I'm never going to say haaretz. So the word for vine is gefen, just like the word for land is eretz. It's an noun. It's called a segolate. 2 segols together is called a segolate. The word for vine is gefen. But you'll notice that when we get to the end of a sentence, Hebrew does this magnificent thing with flowing that it's, instead of saying gefen, it says gafen, ha gafen. If I have a ha on the word and I've got an at the end of a sentence or phrase, in biblical Hebrew and in prayer book Hebrew, you will often see, in the Ashkenazic world, you will often see the noun go from an word to an I call it kind of a denouement. So if you are Israeli or Sephardic or Middle Eastern, you might say this blessing as Borei Pri Hagefen. You will see it in some prayer books written as Borei Pri Hagefen. It doesn't feel right to me to say it that way because I had always grown up with Gafen, Hagafen. It's going to be Hagafen. That's the end of a sentence so that it goes, and it's the exact same vowel pattern. You see what I'm talking about? It's the exact same vowel pattern. You've got a ha, and then it was an for eretz. And this was an for gefen, and it goes to a this under the first letter after the ha, and then a stays the same. Exactly the same vowel pattern. And you're going to see that happen a lot when you have an word at the end of a sentence in prayer book and biblical Hebrew. So Birnbaum is a conservative prayer book. We don't mind. So that's our vocabulary. And those are the prayers, and you all know these prayers. So I don't know if there's any, I don't know that there's questions, but I will tell you, if we look at our, I did skip a word. Hold on, I skipped a page. Let's do this page. I think I skipped a page. These are not one-to-one correspondence. This is just showing that last week we learned these masculine nouns and these masculine words, and this week we're learning these feminine words. We got a dot. Means I can write again. So these were all masculine and singular, and these are all feminine and singular, including the this word, zet and zot. Some of these are or have corresponding words to it. But I want you to notice, other than ata, Moshe has an ending. Ending is masculine. But other than ata, none of these words end in a. And none of these words end in tav. I wish they were more careful, excuse me, about the ones they picked, but Shabbat ends in Tav. It's feminine. Sarah ends in A, Kamatse. Excuse me, it's feminine. Bracha ends in A. Eretz is a place. Many places, whether it's a city name or not, are feminine just because places are feminine. So Shreveport or Las Vegas, I mean, any place name, Yerushalayim, is feminine, even though it doesn't look feminine. It's not about the name of it. It's about the fact that it's a place. Most of them are feminine. So Eretz is a place, it's a land, and it's feminine. Zot ends in Tav, it's feminine. He means she, and it's feminine because it means she or it. At ends in a Tav-ish, it's feminine. And M means mother, so it's feminine. Some of these words are from older languages, and there's a little that they've discovered in some historical linguistics, which will explain why this has a dagesh and shva underneath it when it shouldn't have either of the above at the end of the word. But I just wanted to point those things out because most of the time you're going to see, and by most of the time, I mean more than 80-85% of the time, feminine nouns are going to end in a, kamatse, or tav. And most of the time, masculine words, and that's like even more than 90% of the time, masculine words are not going to end in a or tav. But here we have ata, remember that one, meaning you. And then you get, in the very first day of creation, for example, you get the word Lila. And you know that Lila is masculine for anybody who ever got to say good night in Hebrew, because it's Lila Tov, right? If you've ever heard Lila Tov, and that's a really good way of remembering, is if you've ever heard any, because nouns may trick you into knowing if it's masculine or feminine. Adjectives will be correct 100% of the time. If you're looking at a textbook, it should be 100% of the time. If you're looking at Torah or prayer book, 100% of the time, the adjective will always agree and be, if it's a masculine noun, it'll be masculine. If it's a feminine noun, it'll be feminine. If it's plural, if it's singular, it will always 100% of the time, it will agree, and it will be the correct thing. And you will always be able to tell if a noun is masculine or feminine by looking at the adjective, if you're lucky enough to have an adjective. Or sometimes, depending on the kind of verb that's there, sometimes the verb can tell you also, but the verbs are not, the verbs don't trick you. Verbs will always agree, but the verbs are not as always to see as adjectives. So there's that. So that's our lesson. And it's not a lot of new words, but I will fix those. I'm very disappointed. I'll fix those flashcards. I'm sorry about that. It means somewhere along the line, we moved where the folder is for those slideshows. So I now have to find the folder and re-click everything. I am going to stop the recording.